everybody, and welcome to another board game discussion video. Today I'm going to be doing a sort of follow-up to a video I did a few weeks ago where I talked about starter board games. That is to say, games that are really good for new players that are trying to start up a board game collection. Now, for those of you who have been watching me for a really long time, you know that this was not always my game collection. I started off just like anybody else. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to say what games I personally started with. I'll be talking a little bit about my experiences with board games, but not too much. Mostly just going a little bit down the nostalgia track so that we can all sort of share fond memories and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, for this video, what I want to hear from you guys is your personal comments and questions and all that kind of stuff about your own personal starter games. What did you start up when you started doing the hobby game thing? I would love to hear it. I am very curious. Now that said, starting off, when I was playing games, I started off like anybody else. I played Monopoly and Sorry, I played Trivial Pursuit and all this good stuff. The thing is that the one game I really loved that unfortunately I don't own is Star Wars Monopoly. Right? Now, obviously it's Monopoly, but it's Star Wars Monopoly, you guys, so it's different and better. Okay? It's awesome, right? That's really what I started, and that was just like family home games, right? I didn't actually start playing hobby games until I was in undergrad. Now, the thing is that there was a person I met in undergrad who would host our board game nights. I got very lucky with a job that I had, and this man, he had even more games than what I have right now is what he had back then, almost a decade ago now, and it was always so impressive because I had never seen hobby games before. I was like, OMG, right? So for me, as far as the starter games are concerned, I sort of cheated a little bit because I was one of those people who was very lucky. I had somebody that I knew who was relatively close to me where I could go and I could try out a whole bunch of these really cool hobby games. I didn't have to go and read reviews and figure out if I would enjoy the theme and all that kind of stuff because he had pretty much any game that I could think of, and it was really helpful. But that said, time soon came where I was like, I want to get some games of my own. So the very first hobby game that I ever got is probably not at all going to be a surprise to any of you. It was Cosmic Encounter. Yes, my favorite game of all time was also the first game that I ever got. Specifically, it was this version and this exact one, the Avalon Hill version. So you can see in my case, the box is basically falling apart. I got it for like $5 at a, I think it was actually a Toys R Us, and it was like in the bargain bin. But I was like, oh my god, Cosmic Encounter! Because I remembered all the pieces and things. Now, we didn't actually play with this edition of Cosmic Encounter at my friend's house. We just used the pieces from it so we could play with like 8 or 9 people. But even so, I wanted it for myself. And to this day, this particular copy has only been played a few times, but it is so much fun. And this really started off my giant collection of awesome board games. Again, I already knew that I liked the game. I knew that I really wanted to have it. Next up are essentially a bunch of games that I collectively got all at once. It was just after I decided to start up a collection, and I got a massive infusion from birthday and Christmas gifts, essentially. So one year my parents were just like, well, what do you want? And I was like, I want board games. And my parents were like, wait, what? Like board games? And I was like, I want board games. Well, I didn't do it exactly like that. I was not a child, okay? I was a teenager, and therefore I was very mature, all right? Like, totally. But suffice it to say, one year I asked for all board games, essentially, and what I did for my list is I listed a bunch of games that I had played with this group of people that I worked with, and they were games that I really enjoyed, I personally liked, and the vast majority of them I still greatly enjoy to this day. So just to share, well, most of them, first and foremost is one that will probably not come as a very big surprise to any of you. It is Cosmic Encounter again! Who'd have thunk? But no, seriously, this was one of the more recent games, one of the first games that I got. I got the Avalon Hill version, and then I got the Fantasy Flight version. Now, obviously, this game has seen a lot more table time compared to the other one, and at this point, I've got all 5 expansions. Again, it's my favorite game. What else needs to be said about it? I really wanted it. I wanted the new fancy version. This was just after the new edition came out, so I was really excited about it, and I was reading all the alien powers, because we were working from the, I think it was the May Wayfarer version. So we had like all sorts of different alien powers, all sorts of crazy weird stuff, and I was like, yes, this one has a lot more of the cool stuff than Avalon Hill does. So that's why I was like, give me this, give me this, give me this. And there were actually several games that I didn't ask for as well, and that I ended up really, really enjoying. My sister actually got me this one that I've talked about a few times, Strain. In Strain, the whole point is that you are building up an organism that you will use to go and attack your fellow players. And this is a tile, sort of tableau building game, essentially, but you are using like actual functional organelles from cells and things like that that are represented by tiles. You can also infect your fellow opponents with viruses, and you have to defend against them. You can have toxins that you use to attack and all sorts of different stuff. It's really, really fun. It's a really cool point-based game. I had never heard of it, but obviously it is survival of the smartest and a game of friendly, competitive bioengineering and biocompetitiveness. So my sister saw it and was like, yes, I'm gonna get that for Danny. And she did, and I love it. This game is absolutely hilarious and tremendously fun. More so lately because I've been more and more into the science thing, so it's easier to get people to play, essentially. Right? There are a lot of games that we played that I didn't enjoy as much, also, of course, as the case is, but some of them I started to sort of enjoy a lot more. They sort of grew on me. It took a little bit of time, but I managed to do it. And one of them, in particular, was Race for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy, it started off as a game that I never won. I sort of enjoyed it. I thought it was a cool concept, but I didn't understand the whole engine building mechanic. I still don't understand it with Puerto Rico. I still don't get it, right? I can't do it. But with Race for the Galaxy, I can at least do it. So now I've got, I believe I have 3 of the, I believe it's 4 or 5 expansions now. I know for sure it's at least 4. But this was also one of the first games that I got. It was in that first giant batch that I received. And again, it's a game that really grew on me. It was one that I didn't like at first. I thought it was a little bit too complex. And again, the people I was playing with, they were way better than me. That's the case with all of these games, though. Everybody was so much better than I was. It didn't really make a difference. But Race for the Galaxy in particular, it was more strategic compared to a lot of other games where you really had to think about what phase you're going to pick, what are your opponents going to pick, what are they going for, all of that kind of stuff. And that took me a long time to grasp, but sticking with it, it is now definitely one of my favorite games. I still love it to this day. Again, just like most of the ones here. Another game that was one I really was never good at, but always really loved, and honestly never understood until much later, was a really small but fun one called Citadels. Citadels is a great social deduction game that is also heavily role-picking based. Now, I know social deduction, most people think resistance and coup and like good cop, bad cop, and those types of things, but for my purposes, I really love the deduction of this, where if you're the assassin or the thief, you're trying to figure out what everybody else picked. And the thing is, at the time, I didn't realize that that was the mechanic I really enjoyed. All I know is that it was a fun little game, and it was only like $15, so I put it on my list. And again, this is a game that comes to the table relatively regularly, not super frequently, because there's a lot of other games that have replaced it. So again, I would more so go with like a Spyfall or Resistance or something like that, which gives a similar social feel, but without like the tableau building, which is something that turns off a lot of players. That said, it is still a great little game to bring to game nights, and I do still bring it pretty much all the time whenever I go. Again, still comes to the top of my shelf. Even though I've had it for years and years and years, it is one that I still regularly play as one that I initially got. Next up, we've got another really fun, really quirky kind of game that is just plain weird, and I have a hilariously fun story about. So the game itself is Cassian Guns. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is a Cassian Guns 2nd edition out now, which is much, much better. I will tell you that. However, Cassian Guns, one of the things I loved about it were the expansions. We had the Yakuza expansion, and then we also had the Uzi expansion. The Yakuza one is awesome because you actually get little foam swords, and you get to be like, wha, wha, wha. And then you also get a shuriken that you get to throw. You actually have to physically stand up, step away from the table, and toss it. It's really fun if you guys have never done it. Unfortunately, I cannot get it now because it's out of print. However, Cassian Guns itself, the very first time that I ever played it, and for those of you who don't know, the idea is everybody has a little foam gun, and you pick a card which is a bullet, a click, meaning an unloaded gun, or a bang bang bang, which is an early done bullet, so you shoot before everybody else. And the idea is that you point at everybody on the count of 3 type of thing, and then people surrender so that they're out of the pot, so to speak. The very first time that I played, and the very first pointing at everybody, literally everybody at the table pointed at me. I was just like, fine, I'm out. I don't even care. And the thing is that normally that would just be like, what the fudge? Like, we can't do this. This doesn't make sense. I hate this game. But it was so hilarious. It was just an incredibly fun experience. And again, to this day, I really enjoy it. The problem is, it's tough to bring to the table because you have literal, like, guns that you're using. And the guy that I played with, it's just, it was always interesting, right? Because I think this is a type of game where you really need to play with a close-knit group. Playing this at like a friendly local game store is not nearly as good of an idea because people can get the wrong idea about the game. And it's supposed to be fun and quirky and stupid and weird, but so many people, especially nowadays, can take it way too seriously. So from my perspective and for my purposes, I love it, but I would only ever play it in a private setting with a group that I'm very familiar with, because then we'd all know what it's about and what we're going to be doing. But either way, Cassian Guns, a really, really fun game. Again, part of the big batch that I got early that sadly doesn't hit the table nearly as often as I'd like it to, and I also don't have the second edition or any of the expansions. I kind of wish that I did, but it's been stagnating slightly. Next up is one of the co-op games on this list, actually the only one, which is Shadows over Camelot. Now, for those of you who have been with us for years and years and years, and by us I mean myself and my channel, then you would know that Shadows over Camelot is one of 2 games that I discussed in my very first video. Very first one, literally years ago, because this was one of the first games that I got, and I loved the game. Now, part of the reason why I loved it is because it reminded me of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But that said, again, the social aspect for this game is tremendously fun. You've got a really good trader mechanic. You've got a lot of disparate strategy that has to be done. Are you allowed to leave a specific mission, or do you have to stay there and complete it? What's the overall strategy for all of the knights? Like, how are you going to get what you need in order to quickly finish up quests so that you don't lose them, and all of that kind of stuff. There is a lot of surprising depth to this game. There is also an expansion, which I do not own. Unfortunately, this game does not hit the table nearly as much as it used to for me, and that's mostly because of Battlestar Galactica. That has really replaced this game for me, and I mentioned that in a video I did a long time ago where it was essentially play this, not that, and this was one of the things for that, where like Shadows over Camelot is great, but Battlestar Galactica does it better, essentially. If you like the theme, the whole Arthurian legends and myths and stuff like that, Shadows over Camelot is still great, and I do play it on occasion, just not nearly as frequently as I used to. That said, it is one of the original games that I got, and I still love it, I really do, and it just doesn't hit the table as often. So next up is a sort of high fantasy thing that I am sure you are all at least somewhat tangentially familiar with to some extent. It is probably the biggest strategic game also, and it's also really heavy. The game itself is a Game of Thrones. That is right. Now, you might be wondering, Danny, you were all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed all back in the day. Why on earth are you asking for a ridiculously cutthroat, hardcore strategy game from your parents? And the answer is, because Game of Thrones is really cool. And that's pretty much what it boiled down to. Honestly, at the time, I had never played this game whenever I was asking for it, but I saw it, I saw the reviews for it, how amazing it was. I love Game of Thrones, so I was just like, yes, I need to have it. And in part, I wanted to have a really good, heavy strategy game. Now again, if you have been with me for a long time, you may remember my original, the first strategy-heavy games video that I did, not the revamped one, had this on the top. And part of the reason it was on the top is because I didn't have a lot of options. Right? Back in the day, I wasn't like the crazy wild man that you see before you, where I would be picking games and stuff that I don't even own and all that wackadoodleness. Instead, I was restricting myself, so this game actually was at the top of quite a few lists because it really is a wonderful game. After I got it, I played it as soon as I could, and everybody was just like, whoa. And I was like, yes, good purchase, essentially. Now, to this day, it comes out on occasion, relatively rare, very rarely, I'll be honest. And the reason being that it's just so long. It really is. This is one of those games that you really have to plan ahead for. You got to plan a night around it because it'll take you 2.5, 3 hours at minimum to get through this game. And that's if you're really streamlined, everybody knows exactly how to play, all that kind of stuff, then that's like the basement level that you're looking at. It is still a tremendously fun and wonderful game. It's just, you gotta put in the time commitment for it, unfortunately. But either way, Game of Thrones, it's still a great game. I really enjoy it. The relatively few times that I get to play it, but even so, again, it was one of my first. And so it's got a nostalgia for me. Well, or actually the opposite. Reverse that. But last but certainly not least, there is one more game that I got in my big giant initial game influx that I had, and this is one that I've actually talked about a lot. You may notice that all of these games I have talked about quite a bit, and not even when I just started my channel, but even more recently as well, because again, these games are good. That's part of why I asked for them. That's part of why I wanted them. That's part of why I still play them today. They are simply very good games, and they are very well done. That said, let's get to the last one. So this is one I've talked about in the context I'm about to mention, and it is a classic. It is a game that everybody should play at some point, and it's also one of the games that I had on my list a couple weeks ago where I said good starter games, games that you should play and should know and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I really never play it anymore. It is Dominion. That's right, this was one of the first games that I ever got. Now, part of the reason is that, again, I was young and naive and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I had never played any other deck builders. So I was just like, Mommy, Mommy, Daddy, Daddy, give me Dominion. And they did, and it's awesome. Well, to an extent. It's good. It is a good game. It is a well-designed game, but for me personally, nowadays, after playing a bunch of other different types of deck builders and seeing what else is out there, I do not play this game anymore. I really don't. I believe I played it once like 4 months ago, and that's pretty much it. It does have a second edition out. I don't know if it changes it in any way significantly. Maybe it does. If it does, maybe I'll try that again. But suffice it to say, Dominion is the last of the big batch that I got, and it's also the one of the batch that I play the absolute least, simply because there are other games that I prefer over it. That said, I am not above playing it. I will play it if other people want to, and if that's what the group decides. Like, I'm fine with whatever the group wants. Now, that is the standard sort of sentiment that a lot of people get at like friendly local game stores and the like. And Dominion is relatively rarely on those lists because, again, a lot of people have moved on to other deck builders. That said, you cannot argue against a classic, and it still very much is a classic. It is a well-done, well-designed game, but it's just that I don't play it nearly as often anymore. That said, I'm not planning on getting rid of it. It is still mine, and it was still one of my very first games I ever got. So, with that, that's it for all of the initial games that I got. Essentially, soon after that particular Christmas, I ended up getting a really large number of credit card points, essentially. It's a long story. But suffice it to say, I was able to convert those points into Amazon money. So I went onto Amazon and I got what is essentially the equivalent of about $400 worth of games from all of these points. So that is what essentially started up my entire collection. And just after all of that happened is when I started making all these videos. But these guys are the OGs, the original games. Yeah. And these are the ones that, again, I still love them by and large. I still play the vast majority of them. They're still in my videos. I still put them on all my top 5 and my top 10 lists and my discussions, all this kind of stuff. And again, it's just kind of a fun thing. Let's go down memory lane and all that kind of thing. But with that, I hope that you enjoyed our little trek back down Nostalgiaville or memory lane or whatever you want to call it. Again, please let me know what you guys think about this. What do you have to say? What were some of your original games? What did you guys all play initially, and what did you have fun with, right? Why did you get the games that you got? Why did you enjoy them? Again, from my perspective, I've talked about pretty much all of these games in some context or another, and at the time, I had already played most of them. What did you guys think about games that you had never played? Did you like take a risk and get them with your starting packs? All that kind of stuff. Please let me know anything and everything like that in the comments below. You guys know I love to hear about all of it. And with that, thank you so very much for taking this little journey with me. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.